Welcome to this very special edition of the KJ Masterclass Live, the show which ensures that you profit from your time spent here with experts, either through their industry insights, information, or simply learning from them. And today we have Mica Anders, historian, history detective, people finder, and family mystery solver. Welcome to the show, Mica.
Thank you. Nice. Thank you for having me.
You are welcome. Welcome to the show. Welcome to India in this online form, Micah. And I'm sure not just in India, but a lot of people across the world will benefit from what we are going to talk right now. We'll understand about finding lost family histories, and that is what you do, what you help in. But before that, let's understand a bit more about you, about your background, about your journey, so that people know who they are listening to.
Yeah. So again, my name is Mica Anders, and I am a professional genealogist, which means I spend my days looking for people's relatives, reconnecting people with their family that they've lost in different ways, or using tools like DNA to help reconnect families that have been torn apart through time or circumstances and things like that. I got my start doing this over 15, 20 years ago. I've been doing it professionally for 10.
Absolutely, absolutely. So my first question to you is, have you found about yourself? Did you ever think of that, or have you already done it?
A little bit of both. So it's one of those things where we have a business and we spend so much time helping other people, we don't always do a good job of helping ourselves, right? That's kind of what happens. But I've spent some time uncovering some mysteries. I have mysteries on both my mom's side and my dad's side. I was able to put back together some of the family mysteries on my mom's side. And with every mystery I try to uncover on my dad's side, I find a new one. So it's been a challenge.
Right, right. So let's understand this whole mystery thing about not about it, but about histories. It's about why would someone, uh, take your help, take your service? Past is past. People say, let's bury the past, move into the future. Why dig into the past? Why dig old graves?
So I think really to understand who you are, you have to know who came before you. We are all, our personalities, our ways of being, our traditions are all based on somebody who taught those to us and what came before us. Um, I had a client who didn't know that much about their family. They were just kind of curious. They hired me for that reason. They found out they came from four generations of people who'd been metalsmiths, blacksmiths. They didn't ever know that. And they themselves are a jeweler who works in metals. And and that gave her such a feeling of this is something that's coming through me, through my ancestors and into me. Other times it's family trauma, Maybe why was somebody in our family such a maybe they weren't a loving and kind grandma. Well, maybe once we learn who they are and what kind of environment they grew up in, we have empathy and we can understand them better and why they are the way they are. And I think at the end of the day, history repeats itself. So we definitely want to learn from our past so that we can repeat the good and learn from the bad and not do it again.
So, who are the type of people who want to know about themselves? Do they have some trauma? Is it out of curiosity? Is it they feel bad about themselves or very good about themselves? What is it that make people go back, try and go back into their past?
I have all of that. I think every single one of those people is somebody who's been interested at some point. For a lot of people, as they get older and they become the grandparents and the aunties and the uncles, they think about all the things that they never asked their aunties and uncles and grandparents. And so, since they can no longer ask them, because often they're with the ancestors at that point, they want to do that genealogy and that history research to learn the things that they never thought to ask. Other times it's people who maybe only know one of their parents and they want to learn who their other parent was and learn about that family line. For other people, they're just curious. They don't have any traumas or anything. They're just really curious about their ancestors and maybe they've heard family stories passed down for generations and they just want to get a little bit of sense of who those people were and the stories they've heard from their aunties and uncles and grandparents.
Right. Normally, we see people are not too connected to each other. Today's life, you see, people don't know about their extended family, their neighbors, or anyone. But isn't it a bit strange that we want to still know about generations before us? Is it selfishness? Is it more curiosity? Is it about they want to think that they were, maybe some prince or princess down in the past, and this is luckily they will find it.
I absolutely have people who are hoping to find that king or that queen or that cousin who has millions and millions of dollars and wants to meet them and give it all to them. So there are definitely people who have a selfish interest in it. I think some of what you talked about with that disconnect is what's making people want to learn more. We don't live, especially here in the United States, we don't live in community anymore. A lot of people used to have their cousins around them all the time and their aunties and uncles, and now people are all over the country, which is a flight or a 3-day drive away sometimes. So they don't have that simple connection. So they have to do this bigger digging to learn it again.
Right. So, do you prepare them to actually be able to meet the truth? Sometimes the past may not be that pleasant, and it can leave a scar on you for a long, long time. Has
Yeah.
it happened before? Do you do any preparation before you set out on your work?
Yeah, absolutely. I always try to get a clear sense of what people really want to know. And I ask, are you prepared for whatever I might find? Because it isn't necessarily going to be a joyous, happy thing all the time, like you said. If people are saying, I don't really want to know, I say, okay, well, I'll take you to a certain point and then I might have to stop because I know where it might go next, or I can see the clues that are suggesting. Most people are up for it. If they're ready to learn, they're ready to learn whatever. But I think also, you know, it's up to me to make sure that I prepare them as we have the conversations. I would never just say, "Oh, by the way, here's some really traumatic thing that happened," without proper preparation and making sure that's something they're prepared and ready to hear about.
Right, right. Now let me understand the search process for the audience. Once you get that whole brief, how do you go about your search? Because your search, whatever you say, is going to make a whole lot of difference in people's life. So you
Mm-hmm.
got to be very sure about which nobody else will be able to give that hallmark or some sort of it. So you got to,
Mm-hmm.
for your own conscience, you got to be 100% sure it's not just
Mm-hmm.
a job or some client, but it is something bigger than that. How do you do it? Is there a process to it?
Oh, there's a very, very clear process. So, first we search records. We search records online using traditional things. Here in the US, we use ancestry.com, familysearch.org, and local historical societies and archives and museums and try and find out what they have in their records. But we also go in person to different places. We'll go to local archives and go through the old books and the old will books and the old books of everybody who was born and all of that log. But the thing is, you have to make sure, to your point, that you're looking at the right person. There can be more than one person with the same name. Even if you think you have a super unique name, somebody else could still have your name. So you have to be sure you're not giving somebody else's family history because you weren't thorough. So it's really about being thorough, checking, double checking. We say unless you can find 3 sources, independent sources, we can't say it's true. And even with that, sometimes DNA tells us that all of that still was wrong. But we use words like it's likely that, it's probable that, we believe. Unless we can totally, totally prove it, we want to make sure people know that we are doing our best. We are using all the resources available to us, but we never will say something's definitive unless we can absolutely prove it.
Right. And uh, where you deal mostly with, if I understand, specialize in African American and Midwestern US narratives. So, what does that mean? Help us understand. Is it about Midwestern people? Is it about African American people? Do I understand it correctly? Or if not, please help us understand.
Yeah, so I work with everybody, but a lot of my specialization, the more advanced trainings and things like that that I've done, have focused on African American research. So here in the US, African American research is a lot more difficult because of the history of enslavement in this country. So the records almost stop for a lot of people around 1870, which is not that long ago. And so having a specialized training is important to be able to get past that 1870, we call it a brick wall, to learn more about the families. Now, for the Midwest, most people in genealogy specialize in a region just to, again, have that deeper understanding, that stronger coursework that we've done. And I live in the Midwest. My family is from the Midwest. The Midwest around here would be Minnesota, Iowa, Nebraska, Missouri, North South Dakota, Illinois, Indiana, and a little bit into Michigan. So that's considered the Midwest region, and Wisconsin. And so there's different history in different parts of the country. Obviously, this is a slightly newer part of the country than, say, the East Coast of the United States. So there's different record sets, different history. Part of being good at genealogy is also being a historian. So you have to know the history of the places you're researching. So that's why I say Midwest specialty, because I have an even deeper understanding of the Midwest than I do of some other areas.
Right, right. So, Micah, in your search, has your search started from the US or the areas around it? And mostly, does it conclude there itself? Or has it taken you beyond that continent and in surprisingly to any other place? Help us understand that.
Yes, absolutely. So I follow wherever people's ancestors went. And just because somebody lives in Minnesota, well, at some point they came from somebody else unless they're a native person, right? So sometimes we end up going down to the South. I've taken people back to the Caribbean. People have gone across to England. I've found people in Sweden, um, in the, where else? South America. I haven't found anybody traced back to India yet in my research, but that's just I haven't had any clients who have done that journey with me yet. But I have had clients that we go wherever their family journey takes us. So I have definitely worked Canada even, so all over.
Right, right. So, I want to understand about one thing, and that is about any big surprising discovery you have made in your years of genealogical research. If anything that you would like to share with us.
I've had some great discoveries. I had a family who the father left the family when the children were young, and so they hired me to find their dad. Which is kind of like detective work, right? Not even just genealogy, because he may have still been alive. I was able to find him. He'd switched states. He had changed his name. He had changed his birthday and the place he was from. But I was able to, again, using all those strong records, verify to, I would say, 99% that this was the right man. So that was a huge discovery to be able to trace somebody to an entirely new identity. Um, I've had some really fun cases where somebody wasn't able to learn very much about their family. There were no paper records, everything had been burned up. But then we were able to use DNA and put their family back together generation after generation after generation and get them back a family tree that basically had been taken from them with all the fires that had happened in the place that they were from.
Right, right, Mike. And has it happened that people have thought like they were prince and princess and they've gone back into the past and it was not the case? And many a times they have thought something else when they went into the past. Help us. It's a bit curious. I'm filled with curiosity.
Absolutely. That happens a lot. A lot of people say, "Oh, I my ancestor was the duke of something, or he, was one of the founders of this place and one of the first people ever to such and such and such." And sometimes it's true, but often it's not. And that's okay, because then we say, "Okay, well that's not true, but let me tell you about the ancestors that were actually your ancestors." And while they may not have been famous or infamous, they still had amazing lives and they still did great things. And usually, when we're able to tell our clients about the actual ancestors they had, they still feel like they got something, even though it took away the story. I've had people who say they think every single one of their family lines goes back to royalty. The odds of that are just not very high if you live in certain places. And you're not royal somehow. It's like, oh, how are you not royal? But every single one of your family lines is. So being able to give them back who their actual family is usually a helpful way to balance out teaching them that all the things they've been taught may have been inaccurate.
Right. And anyone's perspective of their heritage that has changed because of your findings. Help us understand that part.
Yeah, so there'll be people who think they're 100% Norwegian, for example.
Okay.
Everybody in my family is from Norway. And then you learn, well, that might not be true. And you teach them about these other people, or somebody finds out that I have a bunch of clients who have found out that they thought they were all white, and it turns out that they had an ancestor who, what we call in the US, is white passing, which means they were likely African American who was very light skinned and chose to pass as a white person. And so then we have to kind of blow up their whole family narrative of thinking that they're one thing and learning that they actually have this whole other ethnicity in them that they didn't even know they had.
Then they have a better understanding of everything that is either black, white, whatever the color is, and that it
Exactly.
actually doesn't matter. It is what you are, how you behave, how
Mm-hmm.
you actually treat others is what that matters. So, in
Mm-hmm.
terms of, how do you feel when you go about doing this work? You must be feeling uh, not only about it's about doing some work, but also feeling very special about doing something noble, something good for those people who have asked you to do.
I love it. I feel honored. I feel grateful to have the privilege of meeting people's ancestors, of reintroducing them to their ancestors. I often feel like I've become a member of the family because I already know so much about their family. And with that, some of my clients, we end up being, in a client relationship or a friend relationship after that for years because it's such a it's such an intimate connection, right? You have to have a level of vulnerability to share who you are and let somebody in to what could be good or bad family secrets sometimes.
Right. And what about the level of DNA testing? Is it very helpful, very trustworthy in such cases? How does and is it? Are there new techniques, new technology coming up which will help into your work better going forward?
So, DNA is very, very helpful. But again, with DNA, you have to be prepared because it might change your family story. Because
Right.
a lot of people raised kids who were not fully biologically theirs. And that's been
Right.
going on forever. But people may never have known. So DNA can open up family secrets, but it can also, like I said earlier, put your family back together. And so DNA allows us to build a bigger, more comprehensive family tree or go places where the records don't go anymore. So in the case of African Americans, we have a point where families were torn apart because of enslavement. And with DNA, we're able to put some of those families back together where there are no paper records whatsoever. And I would say in terms of accuracy, the DNA matches you get are accurate. In terms of the ethnicity report that says I'm 20% this and I'm 4% this, that I would say is more of an art than a science because those percentages shift as the population that has taken those DNA tests changes. So I would never say take a DNA test and believe 100% that what they say you are 5%, 2% will never shift because it does.
Right. And have you ever seen something like called the survivor's guilt in this sort of thing where people in tough situations were able to move out of a place, came into the US or any other area, living a good life today, but some of the other people they come to know that oh they did not survive or they are still living in not a very good situation. Part of the family, same family, but
Mhm.
apart from several generations.
Yes, I have. It's a weird feeling for people, right? They're so proud of their ancestor who made it. They made it out, they made it they did well financially or they got out of a difficult economic situation and bettered themselves, quote unquote. And and then to see, oh, but we have this other line of cousins over here who is struggling in a way that we are not. So I often talk with people about paying it forward. And to me that's about giving back or saying, okay, well, you and your descendants and this line were able to benefit. What can you do to help out in an altruistic way rather than like a charity way, right? What can you do to help out your ancestral cousins who may be in a different situation? And a lot of people are really happy to have a tool, so it takes away some of those guilty feelings.
Right. If I understand this whole uh, quest for knowing about themselves through their family tree, this is growing and it's almost growing at a fast pace. In a sense, it is a business, but I understand, I see it more than a business, more about finding themselves. How do you see this whole thing coming upward and people trying to understand themselves better through this?
Yeah, it's growing from a business perspective, it's about 11.5% increase every year over year in terms of the industry side. So it's growing at a pretty decent rate right now. Um, it definitely has that weird balance of it's kind of like if you're a social worker, right? Like you're giving back, but you're still employed and you're still making money in that field. I think this is something similar. You come into this business because it's almost like a calling. You don't necessarily come into it because you want to get rich, but there is money in this industry, and 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 I think that's sort of the balance of the two, right? Is how do you, if you go too far into it as a money making enterprise, you lose the thing that brings the humanity to it. So it's about balancing the two to obviously make a livelihood, right? Because it's still a profession, but also keep the heart, keep the humanity within it, especially as this is becoming a growing business enterprise.
And that is where I want to understand for those people who want to find out more about themselves today, how should they make sure that they are going to the right person and not to people who are looking at it, as fly by night operators or simply purely as a business? Because that is where you may learn something wrong and that will become your history for you forever.
Yes. And I've actually had people come to me after going to those people and they say, this doesn't seem right. Something, I don't know. Can you recheck the work and then they're double paying, which is just so crazy. Um, I think it's about doing your research. I call them lurkers. There's people who follow me online for quite a while before they hire me, so they can get a sense of who I am, what my business practices are, what my values are, and they can just really see that. They don't just find me, hire me, and go. So a lot of my clients, they spend a little bit of time really looking into it. To better understand, is this person a good fit? Do their values align with my values? Is their mindset similar to mine?
Wonderful. There is so much to learn about all these things about learning ourselves. And I'm sure a lot of people would want to learn more about you, from you, and connect with you. So what's the best way for them to do so, Micah?
So I am online. I'm on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram at this very long name, Anders Genealogical Services. It's super long, but you can also just look for me by my name, Mica Anders, and I will pop up. I'm one of the only Mica Anders that I've found so far. So you can find me online in that way. I try to stay pretty active online. You can also go to my website, andersgenealogicalservices.com. And we have some courses launching soon that I'm really excited about and some other good things happening.
Wonderful. With this, it's a wrap on this very special edition of the KJ Masterclass Live. Thank you so much indeed for joining us.
Thank you.